They say time devours everything, but what if there was a God behind that hunger? One that never vanished, but transformed, hiding in symbols that still spin around us. Because the most unsettling thing isn't that the cult of Saturn once existed, but that it never truly ended. Throughout this journey, you'll discover how an ancient god, the Lord of time, sacrifice, and boundaries, still breathes through our traditions, our modern temples, and perhaps even within your own hand. In the end, you'll understand why every promise we make is a pact with Saturn. Chapter 1. The King of the Golden Age. In ancient Rome, Saturn wasn't just a god, he was a promise. He represented the Golden Age, a mythical time without war or labor, when the earth gave its fruits effortlessly and men lived in harmony, needing neither laws nor hierarchies. It was the ideal of a world that had once been perfect, and that Rome longed to remember. But paradise always has a shadow. Behind the myth of abundance lay a warning. Everything that is born must die. Every harvest demands a sacrifice. Saturn was both the god of fertility and of loss. He brought the gold, but he also reclaimed it. He was the guardian of time, and time, like him, devours all. His statue, standing at the foot of the Capitoline Hill, remained bound throughout the year. Priests wrapped his feet in woolen cords to contain his power, as if fearing that, once freed, something ancient and wild might escape. Only once a year, during the Saturnalia, were those bonds removed, and with them, the rules of the world. For a few days, Rome turned upside down. Masters served slaves, judges drank with thieves, soldiers mingled with the crowd. No one stood above another. Order dissolved into a carnival of excess. Wine, feasts, masks, laughter. The whole city became a distorted mirror where everything forbidden was suddenly allowed. But beneath the euphoria, some saw something darker. They said the festival wasn't just a celebration, it was an invocation. That by unbinding the god, Rome was also releasing his hunger. That every laugh, every raised cup was an echo of ancient forgotten sacrifices. Over time, the rituals grew more symbolic, more civilized. Yet the shadows endured. Some claimed that in the early centuries, Romans still remembered what had once been offered to Saturn, not gifts or animals, but human lives. The people celebrated abundance, but deep down, they knew it was only a truce, a bargain with time. Because everything the god grants, he eventually reclaims. And the most disturbing part is that Rome didn't invent this devotion. It inherited it. The god they bound with woolen cords had been worshipped long before, under other names, before crueler fires. Rome merely kept his legacy alive, and what it inherited was not a faith, but a hunger that never stopped burning. Chapter 2. The Fires of Carthage. Before Rome chained him in stone, Saturn had another name. In Carthage, they called him Baal-Hamon, the god of fire and cycles. There, he was not a symbol of abundance, but a terrifying power to whom the greatest sacrifices were made. Ancient sources spoke of a cursed place, the Tophet, an open-air sanctuary where drums beat ceaselessly to drown the screams. According to Roman chroniclers, Carthage's wealthiest families brought their firstborn children there as offerings to the god. They believed that giving up what they loved most was the only way to ensure prosperity, to keep life and death in balance. The idol of Baal-Hamon, a towering bronze figure with outstretched arms, was fed by an eternal flame. Upon those burning arms, the offerings were placed. As the metal glowed red, the priests chanted hymns for fertility, victory, and wealth. It was a spectacle of the sacred and the unbearable, a dance between fear and hope. Centuries later, Rome would call it barbaric. But what Rome never admitted was that the fire, somehow, never went out. When the legions destroyed Carthage, they didn't just erase a city, they absorbed part of its soul. Baal-Hamon, the devourer, crossed the sea under a new name. In his Roman form, he was no longer the god of fire, but of time. He no longer demanded human lives, but he still demanded something subtler, the awareness that all things born must be consumed. In the temples of Rome, ritual fires still burned. During Saturnalia, men lit torches and candles, symbols of renewal and destruction alike. And though the sacrifices became metaphors, the instinct behind them, the fear of loss, the desire for control, survived. Baal-Hamon had changed names, but not his nature. Where once bodies burned, now it was calendars, coins, harvests, and dreams. Because in Rome, time became the new altar. And Saturn, the foreign god, settled forever in the heart of the empire. Chapter 3. The Blood of Time. When Rome inherited Saturn, it also inherited his hunger. But the greatest empire on earth didn't need altars or bronze idols. It created another kind of sacrifice, more refined, more public, more entertaining. The first Christians believed that gladiator games were the last vestiges of Baal-Hamon's ancient rituals. Instead of priests, there were emperors. Instead of temples, amphitheaters. But the purpose was the same, to offer blood to the god of time. Each fight was an echo of those primitive offerings. The crowd roared, the sun burned on the sand, and the blood fell upon the arena like invisible seeds. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew it. The sacrifice hadn't ended. It had become a spectacle. Saturnalia's laughter and masks blended with the games of the Colosseum, and though history calls them entertainment, their essence was still religious. Every death, every blade raised to the sky, reminded the people that time always collects its due. The emperors understood that symbolism well. When the masses grew restless, they offered them blood. When the gods fell silent, they opened the arena gates. The roar of the crowd became a prayer. Rome had tamed sacrifice, but it had not erased it. Some ancient writers even mentioned a strange scent during the games, a mix of iron, incense, and wine. They said that at certain moments, the air grew heavy, as if an invisible presence were watching from above. A shadow with rings, an old god still feeding through the frenzy. Saturn had changed his face. He no longer devoured bodies by fire, but seconds on the clock. Every combat was a reminder that time kills too, and that everyone, emperor or slave, ends up its victim. Gold and scythe, harvest and death. The cycles repeated endlessly, as if the empire itself were an altar. And when Rome finally fell, some said it wasn't to war or invasion, but because Saturn had come to collect his debt. The god of time didn't need to shed his own blood. He simply waited, and in the end, as always, he devoured his children. Chapter 4. The Lord of Negredo. After Rome's fall, Saturn no longer had temples or sacrifices, but his shadow lingered in alchemical symbols, in mystical treatises, in the dreams of those who dared to face the darkness. The Greeks had called him Kronos, the father of time, the devourer of his children. For centuries, that myth was told as a warning against ambition and power. But the initiates saw something deeper. They said Kronos didn't devour out of cruelty, but by law, because everything born must return to its source. Time doesn't destroy from hate, but from necessity. In Hermetic texts, Saturn represents Negredo, the first stage of the alchemical process, the phase of decomposition, the absolute darkness before rebirth, the moment when all form dissolves so a new one can arise. Alchemists said that whoever has not passed through putrefaction cannot attain gold. That matter, like the soul, must be stripped of pride and reduced to ashes before it can be reborn. Saturn was that dark agent, the end of the beginning and the beginning of the end. For them, his scythe was not a weapon, but a tool. It cut away what was useless, separating the dead from the living, the false from the true. He was the God who forces you to face what you avoid, the guardian of the inner threshold. In alchemical imagery, Saturn often appears stern, holding a scythe or an hourglass. Sometimes he crushes a serpent biting its own tail. Other times, he carries a black crow, the emblem of initiatory death. That darkness wasn't feared, it was sought. Because in Negredo, they said, the soul learns what the light can never teach, to endure itself. In truth, we are all devoured by Saturn. Every wrinkle, every fading memory, every dream the years bury is a small offering. But if we accept that symbolic death, if we fall willingly into his well, something transforms. What time devours, the spirit refines. The ancients knew. True immortality isn't escaping time. It's passing through it, accepting decay, loss, limitation, and emerging reborn. That's why the alchemists whispered their sacred axiom: Saturn does not destroy. Saturn transforms. And whoever understands that truth no longer fears him, because then they realize the God of limits is not the enemy, but the teacher. Chapter 5. The Shadows of the 20th Century. For centuries, Saturn's name lay dormant, buried in symbols and secret texts. But in the 20th century, his shadow rose again. Europe burned with wars, ideologies, and dreams of dominion, and many sought answers in what religion had forgotten. In that chaos, Saturn returned, not as a god, but as an archetype. In 1928, in Germany, a secret order emerged, Fraternitas Saturni, the Brotherhood of Saturn. Its members were astrologers, ceremonial magicians, occult philosophers. They believed Saturn guarded the hardest gate to cross, the gate of the self. For them, the planet represented not evil, but the final test of the soul, the limit, the frontier between the human and the divine. They called him the Lord of the Outer Ring, the last guardian before the light. And no initiate, they said, could reach transcendence without first confronting his own darkness. Their rituals were meticulous, symbolic. Each member had to face his inner shadow, his desires, ambition, and fear. Only by embracing that density could they awaken what they called the Black Sun, an illumination born not from purity, but from the recognition of the abyss. In an age obsessed with control, discipline, and the machinery of industrial time, Saturn's symbol gained new meaning. He became the emblem of structure, law, and matter, the reflection of a world that had traded faith for productivity, soul for efficiency. Temples turned into factories, altars into clocks. Once again, time became the supreme god. Outside occult circles, Saturn reappeared disguised. In culture, in architecture, in politics, artists used him unknowingly. The old distant god, devourer of children, symbol of the limit. Corporations hid him in their logos. Scientists studied him in the sky. Philosophers saw him mirrored in modernity, the god of control, calculation, reason without spirit. Some identified him with Pan, the wild god of nature, another face of the same force. The horned being, later demonized as Satan. Pan, Saturn, Satan. Three names for one essence: matter, instinct, challenge. The energy humanity has always tried to dominate, and that always returns wearing a new mask. The Brotherhood of Saturn taught that the true spiritual path isn't about escaping that force, but integrating it, facing the dark god without fear, and recognizing him as part of oneself. Because everything we deny becomes shadow, and every shadow we refuse to face ends up ruling us. Saturn, the master of limits, never wanted worshippers. He wanted apprentices. And in the 20th century, as the world worshipped speed and progress, his lesson remained the same. Everything that rises without measure must fall. Chapter 6. The Cube and the Hexagon. If you look up at the night sky, Saturn appears as just another golden point among millions. But beneath that calm glow lies a mystery that has haunted scientists and mystics alike. A perfect hexagon etched into its north pole. A storm that has been spinning for centuries. Precise, constant, impossible. Space probes have photographed it countless times, unable to explain how such a geometric form can persist on a planet made of gas. A vast vortex, 6 flawless sides, an eye that never blinks. For science, it's an atmospheric anomaly. For esoteric tradition, it's the god seal. In sacred geometry, the hexagon is the seed of form. When projected in 3 dimensions, it becomes a cube, symbol of matter, structure, and law. The cube represents solidity, stability, order within chaos. It is the perfect shape of creation, and also of imprisonment. Occultists said Saturn's hexagon is the cosmic imprint of his energy, the vibration of limitation, the rhythm that upholds reality. That invisible cube repeats itself everywhere. In temples, pyramids, corporate logos, and cityscapes. Look around you. Buildings, boxes, screens, blocks of concrete. Everything is cubic. Everything is contained, measured, ordered. The world we live in wears the shape of Saturn. Medieval mystics saw in the cube a symbol of spiritual discipline. Whoever understood its structure could rise beyond it, but those trapped within its walls became slaves of time. That's why, in Hermetic tradition, the cube is also linked to black dash dash, the color of pure matter, dense and absorbing all light. The same color assigned to Saturn in ancient texts, to mourning, to altars and formal suits. Black, the color of perfection and of total absence. Some initiates called it the signature of the hidden God, a mark that demands not belief, but awareness. Because wherever humanity builds to dominate the world, Saturn stands watching, reminding us that everything solid, everything that claims to last, will turn to dust. And yet, the cube can be seen differently too, not as a prison, but as a vessel for the spirit, a place where light, confronting darkness, discovers its meaning. Perhaps that's why the hexagon on Saturn never dissolves, even after centuries. It symbolizes the impossible balance between order and chaos, between creation and destruction, between matter and time. Saturn needs no temples. His sanctuary is in space, his altar in the human mind. Every structure we raise, every law we write, every shape we give to existence is an echo of that hexagon spinning in the sky, unchanging, patient, eternal. Chapter 7. The Ring and the Pact. The cult of Saturn never needed visible temples. Everyday symbols were enough. Look at your right hand. You wear a ring, a perfect circle, symbol of time, commitment, and limit. The ring is a miniature Saturn orbiting your finger. Every promise is a pact with time, every vow a repeating orbit. Close your eyes and trace a circle in the air. Without knowing it, you're drawing his seal. Saturn doesn't seek worship, he seeks awareness. He reminds us that everything we possess, even life itself, belongs to time. And every time you break a promise, it's time that collects the debt. Chapter 8. The Master of the Threshold. Saturn was the god of harvest, gold, and the scythe, the master of limits and silence. Perhaps he was never a tyrant, but a stern teacher. He teaches that freedom isn't escaping time, but understanding it. So when you gaze at the night sky and see that distant point of light, remember, up there among the rings, an ancient god still devours. But he also waits. He waits for someone to look at him without fear and whisper, "Time does not devour me today." Because that day, the pact is reversed. You're no longer a slave to time. You're its witness. And if this journey has made you see the sky differently, subscribe and join me on the next threshold. There, where every myth becomes a mirror,